Hello, cheers, everybody. We got a brand new setup this week, so I hope you enjoy this. We have Clint over here on the side. We have Clint. Let's give him a hand, everybody.
Doing some pro video.
So last month it was kind of on my mind a little bit because I was talking to one of the guys at the YMCA, Jim. Give you a shout. And Jim was saying that he had a hard time listening, so he kind of checked out. So as we got to talking about this, I got to talk about Clint. Clint's been a guy who comes in and he buys a lot of stuff at the in the store so far this year. As you know, we just celebrate, the 2024 coming to an end, and Clint literally is a huge CD guy himself. So we got to talking, and so now this might become a normal thing as well, hopefully, because he's brought a whole new dimension to this now. So we've got a better camera, we got better production, and we got better sound right here on the table. So thank you, Clint. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So with that, let me tell everybody too. So one of the things that when we got started here, you didn't get to see this before, but it's a little prop. Now that I just turned this bad boy here into a coffee table, we now have some access here to show something that Josh, this was a kind of a mindset. Josh, tell us what you were thinking about this when you did this.
Oh, so we originally kind of started off when the up here was done, was kind of like have a Saturday coffee club. That's kind of where we get together and hang out. So we got the coffee maker in here, and I went around and got everybody kind of their own cups. So we kind of represent what everybody's kind of into. So Lance is the Beatles, of course, Mike's Motley Crue. We got some Bowie for Brad, and if nobody knew, Kenny's an Elvis fan, so we had to get Kenny an Elvis.
It'll only take 10 minutes to get into that.
Did you guys hear about Elvis, that he existed?
and I'm a Frank Zappa guy, so I have to represent Frank. So that's where those came from.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, let's get right into our music for this week now that we have kind of our subplot done. Right. So tell us what you were thinking, what you talked about, and we just got done listening to this album.
All right, so I picked Delaney and Bonnie and Friends on tour with Eric Clapton. This record was recorded in 1969 in England, released in 1970. It was one of very few Delaney and Bonnie albums that came out. Their first ones came out in 68, and by 72 they were kind of disappeared off the scene. So as I was telling the guys before, this isn't one of my favorite records per se, but the stories behind them and how things branched off from this is what really intrigues me and always enamored me to this record. So Delaney and Bonnie were American couple. Bonnie was the first white Ikeette. They were one of the first white acts ever signed to Stax Records. There was some history, some labels.
For people that don't know, what is Stax?
Blues record label that was started in the late 60s. So they're on tour, going around the world. Eric Clapton meets, or not around the world, around the country in England. Eric Clapton meets him when he's on tour with Blind Faith. He spends a lot of time playing with Delaney and Bonnie in their group. So they're the opening act. Eric's playing with them, and he's playing with Blind Faith. When that ends, Eric helps them get their new record deal with Atco Records in America, and they go on this tour of England, and they record this album. Many of the artists on this record go on to help Eric Clapton record his first solo record, Eric Clapton, and then a lot of the artists, besides Delaney and Bonnie, a lot of the artists follow him through and form Derek and the Dominoes. So we get Layla and Assorted Love Songs, basically from a lot of the people that Eric Clapton first performed with on this record. So this horn section go on to record with the Rolling Stones and things. So yes, this was our record, and I'm excited to hear what all the guys had to think about it. So Lance?
no pressure, Lance.
No, yeah, I thought it was good. I'd never heard of them before. Obviously heard of Eric Clapton, so it was nice. It was a cool older blues album. The track that stuck out with me was track 1 on side B. I don't know the name of that.
That's What My Man Is For.
Yeah.
The one that Bonnie sings.
Yeah. Oh, that was just great. I don't know. That one like gave me chills. It really showcased her vocal range on that, and I don't know. It just like takes you to like a time. Like I don't. That track was amazing. But yeah, the whole album was a fun listen. It was something new that I would have never picked this up. I would have never even known to search for it. So it was really, really cool.
Well, here's the big question: would you, when you see a copy at Music and More or another store, will you pick up a copy?
I'll definitely consider it. Definitely will, especially with starting to get into some of like the Cream and Eric Clapton. Like I think that I don't know. I'm one of those people. I like to collect a full discography that people have been a part of. So yeah, now knowing that Clapton was in this, yeah, I could definitely see myself maybe snagging a copy of this album.
Mike?
Well, my perception.
Mike hates live records.
I'm the live guy. But the album as a whole, it's just got it's an upbeat feel to it.
Good point.
The songs are really, it just has a fun vibe to it.
Right.
It just, you can tell they're getting into what they're doing, and they're not, it doesn't kind of wax and wane like some albums
Right.
do and bring you down. It just, across the board, has got a fun feel to it. I was looking at some of the credits on recording engineers, Andy and Glenn Johns, who at that point in time were doing everything. Producing for everyone in England, and so I mean that's something that always interests me when I look at these old albums is
Production.
those common threads, not only in the musicians but
Production.
the engineering and the production and recording end of it. But yeah, I mean, and I'm not a live album guy, but it doesn't come across as a live album.
Right. Cool.
It's in my aversion to some live albums is you don't know if it's live.
Right.
There's so much out there. There's so much hearsay on, especially a lot of the 70s stuff, is how much of it is live.
Right.
Something like this is probably 100% live.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but when I heard this album, when I came up and you guys started it, it's like, man, this would be great to see live.
Right.
Like the everything on this it plays well to
Sound overly live until sometimes you'd hear the crowd.
Crowd.
It's like, oh yeah, okay, yep, this is a
It's
live
like-
album. But it's not like some live albums you listen to. It's like, this sounds awful. Like I honestly don't know why you guys recorded this, but this one, yeah, you really couldn't tell it was live until the crowd.
Well, some of this too, and even in '69, we weren't into massive PA systems either, though. So the room was
it
was
was their
the
amps.
amplifiers. Yep. So you get some. That's one thing that I always kind of liked about that you mentioned that live thing is that you kind of get that live feel, and I think that's kind of what Clint was saying is that you want to be there. That must be what that is. That invokes that feeling, that sentiment.
Brett.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One thing is crack musicians in the rhythm section. I mean, I think part of it is the recording, but I wanted to hear the more bass. But the bass player, the drummer are tight. And the horn section is amazing. All of that is so well done. And if you haven't heard the record, you'll want to check this out. Especially if you like the blues, maybe the feel of a jam. That's the other thing. It has this jam feel to it, but it's not loose. It's tight. These people are playing together. The whole record's like that. It doesn't loosen out and somebody goes awry and on a rabbit trail with a guitar or something. No, it's tight and it's really together, and that's why it has such good energy.
Right.
This record has a lot of energy, like it's already been stated here, that it doesn't really get away from that. It's always coming at you with that energy. And I know the English people in the 60s, that a lot of these bands were infatuated with blues music, and they revived it, and they held it high. Well, this kind of comes out of this, but there's something more to this. You get the horn section brings out this I want to say almost Memphis soul kind of feel. That southern stack sound comes through on the horns, and it really is. That's what really makes it. So
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say the same thing, but first off, I've got to say what Lance said. Number one is that I did enjoy song number 1 on side 2. I as well was really like impressed with her voice. There's a spot there at the very end where she just, oh my goodness, I was like, I just went like that. Yes, it was absolutely beautiful, and so very impressed with that. But I really, really loved what you called when they said, "Is this the encore?" This a
Yeah, because
encore?
so near the end of the album, they do some intros and things like that, and it sounds like they're coming to an end. They go, "Happy Christmas, thanks for coming," and then there's this other song, which is a Little Richard medley.
That's what it's titled, and I absolutely loved it because for me, Elvis had done a lot of those songs as well very early on. It only took 7 minutes, 6,
12,
12 minutes. Yeah, I'm a little late
New
on
record.
this one, but I didn't get to talk right away. So to me, when I'm hearing that, a lot of this record, even you had said it. You know, besides that medley and other ones, you can literally hear like Elvis playing on a lot of these tracks, and I could see some of his mannerisms kind of playing some of that out. So those were my 2 favorites. So if you do listen to this online to sample it, or you find a copy, I don't think I have any in right now. I'm going to try to dig some out at home if I can find any, but Josh already said he was looking and he couldn't find any here. So, but those were mine. 2 on side 2 would have been 1 and 4. And so with that, Josh.
All right. So, had I never become a fan of Eric Clapton, I would never discover this record. I'm so glad that I discovered this record. Just because there is a feel to it, there is a frivolity to it, some funness to it. I'm also a great big Janis Joplin fan, so there's moments in here where Bonnie will take off and sound like a Janis Joplin, but then she'll rein it in and she won't have that rasp to her voice. And an interesting side story, they were friends, they knew each other quite well and toured together. So I always liked that aspect. This was kind of really the first time that Eric Clapton performed in a band where he was able to bounce off another guitar player. So the other guitar player besides Delaney is Dave Mason from Traffic. So for those 2 guys to kind of play off each other, it really opened it up, and it keeps it tight. Like Brad said, the jam part is really tight. It's very well organized. It's kept together, and then both of the guitar players don't step out of their lanes. They don't overcompensate. They don't try to run over each other, and they just kind of let the music go through. That's something that Eric Clapton was always really good at too, in all their live records. His live records is never like the Cream stuff, never really gets out of hand. So, Coming Home is one of my favorite tracks on here. It's the 3rd track on the 2nd side. It's written by Bonnie and Eric. They wrote it together when they were on tour with Blind Faith. And yeah, I don't want to discuss it as the last track on the first side. That's probably my other favorite one that I really enjoy. But yeah, that's that. My kind of thoughts on it. So, that 60s blues revival stuff, we had talked about it before. That what I call reverse engineering music. So when you find an artist that you like, start going back through some of the other things they've done and see who influenced them. And you go back, and if you get into a rabbit hole like this, if you get into the Eric Claptons or the Jimmy Pages or any of those musicians, and you can wheel it all back to the Robert Johnsons and a lot of those things, a lot of the early blues artists from the early 1900s, which is what that revival did. And thank God it did, because we ended up with a lot of great musicians and a lot of great music out of that kind of that revival era.
So do you think then that if you take this record here, do you think this record is more about Delaney and Bonnie, or is it more about Eric Clapton?
This record is about Delaney and Bonnie. So to throw Eric Clapton's name on it, that would not be an Eric Clapton thing. That was not what Eric Clapton was about in this era. He was trying to blend in. He was just trying to be part of a band. He didn't want to be a name on it. He was on the marquees in England because he was the draw. But this was probably more of a record label decision to sell records, and which, like Mike pointed out, was probably on the reason that we have like giant Eric Clapton stickers on the the original wrapper of one.
Well, you got to tell them the story here, like the cool story with this. Where did you find this album here?
I found the jacket at Music and More.
Oh wow, funny.
Sealed. Original shrink, as we call it at the store.
So one of the things, and let me give a record tip to people too, while we're saying that, I always love to tell the young people especially too, and those people who are hard collectors. You told me too when we were talking about this, he said it really wasn't about the record for this one as much as it was for the cover. And I've done that for many records. I've paid $15, $20 for an Elvis record just for the cover. And the reason why is one of the things we like to do as the collectability of records is we like to have the original shrink wrap, and then you got the hype stickers that were put on it, which tells a little bit about, like what he was just saying, some of what they thought about that record at the time as well. And so even still to this day, if I buy a 180, I just make a tiny little slit. I leave everything on there, right, for posterity.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, and that's what makes these cool, like the little stories. The other interesting thing about this cover, as I had mentioned before we started, the cover, Delaney and Bonnie couldn't agree on a cover picture of themselves that they liked. So they were a married couple. They probably fought about which picture they wanted. So what they ended up doing is using a picture that was taken in 1966 while Bob Dylan was on tour, and the feet hanging out of the car are actually Bob Dylan's. So yeah, that's where the cover comes from. And then the back, of course, is the whole band. That was the shot they agreed on, that everybody's walking down the road. So kind of cool.
Yeah, I will also say this, that if your only introduction or known song about Delaney and Bonnie and Friends was Never Ending Love Song, the huge AM radio hit, this is very different. So when you go, yeah, because that was a massive hit. I mean, my mother would sing that song. I mean, when it came out, it was such a massive hit and well liked. But this is something a little different and really has its roots in the blues. So yeah, just wanted to say that.
And that's so awesome about it. You know, that you mentioned the bass. I don't care if I'm listening to just garbage top 40 whatever, or just any type of music whatsoever. I hear the bass, and the bass in this album is moving and it's tight, and yeah, it makes you want to be there. And it's not all the same from song to song. I mean, these guys are all over the place, but like you said, they're so tight that yeah, fantastic album.
Right.
Recorded the year I was born.
Nice.
Well, what was the other things you were saying too? I liked when you were giving us the prelude to this, and I learned a lot from that too. So maybe some other people might pick up on some of that. Give us a little bit of that history that you were talking about with Clapton.
Oh, so I don't get in trouble, I'll leave some of it out. But Clapton had kind of gone through, so he's in the Yardbirds, he's fairly young, they become very successful. We get the whole Clapton is God graffiti, where there's a very famous picture of that. And he leaves the Yardbirds, he forms Cream with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker. There's a lot of infighting in that band. They produce some amazing songs, and fantastic music comes out of that. But there was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of what ended up being what Clapton considered money laundering was funneled into the Bee Gees, which was the next project. And he decided when he was done with that, he wanted to just be part of a band. So he meets this up and coming musician in England named Steve Winwood. and they form a band called Blind Faith.
Which I do have some copies of that one.
Yep. You have the edited cover. Yep. The re-released cover. So they record that. They go on tour. Eric ends up being in that band with Ginger Baker, the drummer, which is one of the things he was trying to get away from. Is he didn't want to be in any of those dynamic situations anymore. He's just trying to kind of blend in, and that's why he kind of got so involved with Delaney and Bonnie when they were on tour together, because he just kind of was a member of a band. That's why I can honestly say that it was probably had nothing to do. This was a record label decision to throw his name on there. I don't think he cared.
Well, yeah, he could have just been included as the in Friends.
Right.
Good point.
Well, that's
Well,
Delaney and Bonnie
about
though didn't have a real band.
Okay.
They had pickup bands like this. So where they would go, they had musicians that worked with them, I'm sure, all the time. But a lot of the fun was you would gather the people that were there, and then you would get kind of that environment's feel. So on this tour, George Harrison actually ends up playing with them under a pseudonym, so there's not this mad Beatles rush. But he ends up playing slide guitar with them, and the next couple of shows after this one was recorded. But like I was saying earlier, that Clapton ended up continuing to record with several of these people along a lot of many projects. And the bass player he recorded with up until 1978, when he passed away in 1980. So, yeah, I think that's what you were getting at, right?
Well, one of the other things, though, and some of you can probably put a little more perspective on this as well, is in my mind here as you're telling some of this story about that picture of kind of driving around England. Now, I was fortunate enough that I was actually able to teach in England for 3 months, and so I kind of got to tour the countryside a little bit and see the pub-style life and how everything is, what it's like over there, and I was absolutely amazed. It was so beautiful. I would definitely recommend it for anybody. But my mind started to go into this mindset of what must that have been like looking at all these British acts. And you've got to do for the camera a little bit of your voice with this, Brad, because we're enamored with it all the time.
I don't think I can, Kenny. I can't. I shan't do it tonight.
So, thinking of some of these,
Really,
what is this culture like in Britain at this time? Because we have all of the greats seem like they're from Britain. No offense to any American people. The only great is Elvis.
Right.
Okay, in America.
There were actually a couple different scenes going on at the same time. So we're talking 1969. There's the Psych thing is going on in England too at the same time that's going on here. But this blues revival was kind of almost the counterculture to that.
yeah.
It was kind of the Eric Claptons and them were not going to be all dressed up and do all those things. They were never so flamboyant. Like Jimi Hendrix, a very flamboyant dresser, and Clapton, they tried that with Cream, and it just didn't fit, and he did not like it. So, yeah, this was kind of that counterculture, and this was at the end. This is probably one of the last things that comes out of that blues revival type era in England. I'm sure there were some other things in the 70s and the early 70s that I'm not familiar with, but it was December of 69, and that both those kind of movements kind of died at the same time, or tapered off, I should say.
So what do you think some of the other big albums from that blues rock genre would be?
Well, I was thinking of the Stones right away because they were all about the blues. But then they started writing their own songs.
Right.
And so, to me, they were kind of coming into their own about that time.
This time, yeah.
Okay.
And they were kind of, they left London Records and they started their own Rolling Stones record, which was part of Atlantic. And they were coming into a new height, a new thing. Exile on Main Street was to follow. Let It Bleed, I think, was 69, somewhere in there. So they were kind of coming into their own and finding their way. So I would say that was going on then. Of course, the Beatles broke up in April of '70, somewhere in that vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a kind of an end of the era, like Josh was saying, for a lot of things. And the psych was dying down, and
but a lot of the roots of other things come from that. So as we were talking before, like Jimmy Page was a member of the Yardbirds. He joined the Yardbirds after Clapton and before Led Zeppelin. Well, you can hear a lot of that blues element in Led Zeppelin. I mean, and that is literally based on Robert Plant, and all of them came up in an era and in a scene that was based on this revitalizing the blues, the early 1900 blues music from America. So that's like all over, and a lot of that British rock from the early 70s and mid 70s too. And it ended up influencing us over here. So
ZZ Top started in '69.
Ah.
Yep. That's that southern. Yep, that was that era, that Austin, Texas, Louisiana. There was a great big blues scene down there that was not. It just didn't catch on, and it probably would have had the United States been the size of the United Kingdom, where it's smaller, but it's just so diverse and so diverse, and we also were getting flooded with the hippie culture. The news was all about the hippie culture back then, so it would be hard to break through.
You're right, because that sets the whole stage for that anti-war protest, and right, it's dominating a lot of our TV and everything. So they're pretty much tied up in a lot of that.
Yep, for sure.
When I was in Bismarck State College in the early '90s, a bunch of buddies of mine and I got together, and with some of the faculty, we brainstormed a '60s class. And so we had one of the professors came in and did a unit on history. One came in fashion, and then one was music. And I can't remember who it was, the vice president of the university at the time, but absolute academic, looked like Mr. Bentley from the Jeffersons. And the guy's got a music collection that would blow everybody away. He's bringing in stacks of original Mothers of Invention, and some of the psychedelics, and just all of this stuff. And we're looking at this guy. He's got tweed patches on the elbows of his. It just doesn't compute. But the guy was just an encyclopedia of '60s music, and they took all these aspects of the culture of that time and kind of tied it together. It was a privilege to hear all of that.
That would have been cool. Really cool. So what would, give us tie us into Elvis. Well, I know you want to. Besides Tutti Frutti,
right?
There's some other things you gotta put you on the spot.
Well,
it's been.
What I would say is, if we think about the jam
15
session,
minutes.
if we have the jam session, right, and the jam style, I think of like Elvis would do this a lot in his concert versions, which would get me back to one of Mike's comments earlier. No offense, Mike. None taken, right? But Elvis live is absolutely amazing. Like, he is unlike any other artist. It's almost heavenly listening to him in concert. I was just a wee little lad. But I've listened to every concert record, and I can hear a lot of this. Of course, I watch the movies too, like some of the concert movies, and you see Elvis has this way of like with that jam session, kind of like playing with the band. And what the cool things with that is, he has a whole jam session going on. He's got a guy vocals with J.D. Sumner. He's got the Sweet Inspirations behind him, with Sissy Houston, Whitney's mother.
And the horn section. He's got that whole big sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
And bam, and he'll go like this, and he's moving. His movements are completely choreographed to all of that jam session that you. And you even said it yourself. He even said it. So it wasn't me that said it, right?
Well, there's one track that could have been an Elvis song. And actually, Josh said it too.
Yep.
That Elvis could have sang it, and it would have just been fine.
Yeah.
Because it has the same breaks and
Do you remember which one it was? And during the song at the end, I even want like just try to time it out and
I think
throw it out
was
like Elvis.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Definitely.
has that.
And one thing I'd like to say for you all too is, if you didn't know, a lot of times you can go onto YouTube and you can put on this album, and you can listen to the whole album. They'll have you. People have downloaded most of the albums that we're listening to, so you can go on there, check it out, see if you like it, and then maybe buy it if you want as well too, or look for it.
Yeah, and for the completists, Josh also told us that there's like a CD box set of all
yes.
the, it must have been all the recordings or whatever it was, and it's in a flight case.
Yeah,
or,
looks like a
or
flight
something.
case. Yep.
Yeah, so it's something you can, if you're the ultimate fan, wants to check that out for all the tracks and stuff. So
Well, hey, why don't you grab me that cup up there? Let's draw a winner. Now we forget to say, and I know Eric, who's working in the store, he oftentimes forgets too. But if you come in the store, if you're listening, make sure you sign up. We've got tickets in here, and we give $10 away free for a gift certificate to put towards any purchase you want inside the store. And so with that, I've got a bunch of them. He's going to turn them all around here, so I don't know whose name is on what. And I'm going to pick one. Clint's in there. Let's watch Clint.
Clint's crossing his fingers.
Maxwell, free tag. Max is actually watching. He was telling me. I know you're watching, Max.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Max.
So which album did he?
Yeah, which album?
We don't know.
I bet it was Power.
Oh, did we have a second one on there? Did he put a vote?
No.
You can also make a vote down there. Which was your favorite? We put up some albums that we all like on the wall too, so feel free to check those out. I think they all voted for mine though, for sure.
Yeah, the only one on here was for Frank Zappa, and that looks like it was my wife that filled that out.
Oh.
Probably me that filled it out for her.
Yeah, and
That's a joke for Kenny.
I chose Autobahn by Kraftwerk, and like several days later, it's sold off the shelf. So
I think
that's the
that
way
one
it goes.
You could say Brad won that one.
Brad won.
That's what I'd say.
I'd say that, and then but Lance won the first one because Richard Marks did sell it first.
He didn't even pick it.
He didn't pick it, but it did
I
win.
still don't even think I.
So, okay, so here's the joke, everybody. So Lance was gone the day we decided to put records up of some of our favorite records. So when you come in here, you look over the record player, you see all of our picks are listed. And so because he was gone, one of the guys chose Lance's favorite. And of course they got the most obscure non-rock record they could get. They went for Richard Marx.
So I will also say,
Offender.
Yeah, and that was the record.
Right?
Yes.
Well, I was right here waiting, but
I will also say that I picked Genesis Live 1973 to fill the space of the Autobahn record, and that's not a very popular live record, but it's one that I do like, and I'm kind of with Michael on this. I'm not a big live record guy. I because what they create in the studio doesn't always happen in a live setting. It's something else. It turns into something else. Not so with this record. This has all the goods, and it happens properly. I will also say that about the Genesis Live with Peter Gabriel, is that they pull off some amazing things live, and check it out. Genesis Live, 1973. Sure.
So what do you think about Elvis Live? You've heard some of Elvis stuff.
Yeah,
Don't you agree? He's beautiful.
Sure. And okay, I will say the 68 comeback is excellent. But I can't say I listened to
All of them.
the Hawaii Live thing through its entirety. So
Okay.
I'll have to rely, go to you on the. On
I'm
the
not
review of
biased,
that.
but it's good.
Okay.
Here's the only shot I'll take at Elvis tonight, I promise. If you go through this and you go through all the credits, and it will say right here, horn arrangements by Jim Price and Delaney Bramlett. So he helped, as being the singer, songwriter, guitar player, he also helped arrange the horn section. So
Oh, nice.
telling
That's
you a
actually
lot.
pretty amazing.
Right.
So Elvis wasn't the only one that could do that.
Right.
One of the things we do talk about is we get into these conversations, and this is some subplot that is always going on and underlying a lot of our conversations, is who is the songwriter, okay? And Elvis gets a lot of flack.
You know who isn't.
Right? See, here it comes. Because he wasn't a songwriter. But I said he didn't have to be, okay?
That's
because he was arranging it, and he had sounds in his head. For example, one of my favorite comments is Paul Simon. Okay, Paul Simon says, after he hears Elvis redo his Bridge Over Troubled Water, he says, how am I supposed to do that after Elvis does it? Right? With the full complementary sections. Elvis heard it much grander. Right? Not this. Like a breeze.
Grander's not always.
But
that's not even. You
that-
know,
yeah.
I take that. I don't know how I take that.
Uh-oh.
Because
I know
Paul
where he's
Simon
going.
is a much different
Right.
artist than Elvis.
Okay,
Elvis is
okay.
a larger than life, flamboyant
Yep.
person. Regardless, he could take any song
Good point. Good point.
and amplify it
Right.
just because that's how it is.
Reinterpret it.
Yep.
you
Is
know.
it is it better? No, I wouldn't say it's better.
But what's
different.
the mood you're looking for? It's different.
You know, Paul Simon is a completely different person,
Right.
completely different artist, and
I mean, you can look at some of just like the way the Little Richard medley is arranged here. It's not better than they don't do Long Tall Sally better than Little Richard, but it's arranged differently. It's performed differently. So there is something to that, right? If you take Bridge Over Troubled Water and it gets arranged into this great big production, of course Paul Simon can't compete with that. That's not that's not a slight toward Elvis or to Paul.
but that's and again that comes to Paul and if he'd depending on who he was working with, if he'd have been working with a different producer at the time, they might have said, "This is what we're going to do with this song."
Let's make it bigger.
Yep.
And
Or what?
Maybe.
Go.
But, you know, sometimes, especially with a great song, it's not cover for cover's sake. It's somebody hears something in that song that even the creator themselves didn't hear.
Ooh.
So, I mean, Johnny Cash, Hurt.
Yep.
Trent Reznor heard that and goes, "That's not my song anymore. I'm done. I'm out. I'm out."
Yep.
But then earlier this week, I heard Tina Turner's kind of her '80s resurgent hit when she came back. I think it was "Better Be Good to Me."
Mm-hmm.
Was it that? I'm trying to remember if it's that one. But it was originally done by Spider, like 3 years earlier, and she changed almost nothing, cover for cover's sake. Now you could say, well, Elvis can take it and make it grand, but okay.
Right.
It's grand, but did he really reimagine it? Did he hear something in that song? It's like, I got to get that out. I'm only asking, which means I'm not dissing Elvis.
Well, what I would say is this, that I think every artist, and this is what my belief is on cover songs. It'd be interesting to see what y'all think, because I get in a lot of discussions on when we do covers. I think when somebody does a cover song, they need to do something to make it theirs. Okay, I have no problem with someone doing a cover, but how are you hearing it in a different way and presenting it in a different way than what I'm used to hearing?
Anytime an artist does a cover song, they're introducing themselves to it. You can't, I played in an acoustic cover band, a couple of them, and every time that we play a song, it was our interpretation of that song. So we could never be, you could never do a Matchbox 20 song exactly like Rob Thomas and Matchbox 20. You just couldn't do it. So that became the reimagining of it, and that's, you decide to do that, then it becomes your take on that song. So sometimes those aren't even conscious efforts. Like in my last band from years ago, Sport and Wood, for anybody that might be watching and remember that, we played a lot of songs. We played them pretty much twice as fast as they were recorded. And that was because we wanted to get through as many songs as we could to keep the audience engaged, because acoustic band's kind of slow. You want to keep things moving, keep people upbeat. So then everything became twice as fast. So that was kind of our take on some of those songs. So,
well, there's a difference, I think, in doing a cover song live. Any live artist has done cover songs.
Right.
They started out doing cover songs because that's how they learn. My take on some cover songs on albums, a lot of times are just filler.
right.
Oh.
Well, Toast of the Town by Pretty Boy Floyd, though, is a pretty good cover of a Motley Crue song. But it definitely doesn't sound like Motley Crue.
Motley Crue's not no stranger to putting a cover song on for filler. But, so, I mean, doing a live one I think is a different experience than recording one and putting it on an album.
True.
It just doesn't get any better, though, than when Fish does Gin and Juice.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan Colton did a really good cover of Baby's Got Back, too, on acoustic guitar. So
No, I just really think that, a lot of times when it comes to cover music, I think that I just personally really appreciate like a reinterpretation and like present it in a different way. And so like, and what I'm saying really there, and I wasn't, when I said that, I know it looked like I was dissing Paul Simon, but I wasn't.
No.
I was trying to point out through exaggeration or a hyperbole the difference between like this very melancholy song that is very depressive, right? And all of a sudden in Elvis way, in the Elvis interpretation, what I always say is that Elvis has a way of making songs spiritual that aren't spiritual. Like when I hear Bridge Over Troubled Water and I see Clint shaking his head, he agrees with this, is that I think of it now as a religious song, and it has no religious intention at all. Because that's the way that he was. He turned it he had that gift with his presentation.
Well, that's where you have to ask yourself, okay, did he look at that song and say, okay, I hear something spiritual in it, or did he look at that song and go, I hear a little Elvis in it?
Yeah.
Or did he look at it and think, that's people already know that song, and
yeah, this is a business.
Here's a way to make some more money.
Yeah.
Well, that, or I mean, especially for an up and coming act that starts doing covers, is it more easy, cost efficient to just secure the rights to cover a song rather than to hire writers and all this other sort of stuff and go through the rigmarole? After all, it's primarily a business, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, and if you don't know, like if you ever do the Graceland tour, which I would recommend if you go into Memphis, obviously, you go down to the basement and you see his record player down there, and Elvis would get all kinds of stuff, and I've got some stuff like what you're talking about and how we do that dive and what people listen to. So Elvis was a huge Odetta fan, and so Odetta's doing Dylan, and she's doing a lot of other stuff, and she's an African American artist, and so I found some Odetta along the way, and me knowing that, I've grabbed it for my listening, and I'll sit there and listen to it.
That's the reverse engineering thing that Josh is talking about.
Yeah,
I think it's critical. I like to do that.
And he would just sit down there and just listen to records, and he'd be like, I'm gonna do this one.
So Graceland, you mean like the Paul Simon album?
Oh, ouch.
No, just coming full
Touche,
circle.
touche. Right? So with that, do we have any comments or questions online from anybody tonight?
That's a good question. Let's take a look here.
Does anybody have any questions? Let me make sure to leave an option for you. One of the things with Max here, I'll tell you in some of our waiting time as we look for this, Max is very eclectic too. He likes a lot of rock. He's a young guy. I love that. We have a
it's great to see the young people
come in,
getting involved with music and looking back and maybe finding some things they like. It's just been a lot of fun that way.
Well, I like they're finally seeing the value in owning it.
Physical media.
Yeah.
And I read, and CDs are starting to come back. I know you just had a big CD sale, and I've read articles on that, and they say the CD market's going to keep getting stronger because the vinyl market's kind of been cherry picked now for the past 20 years. So they're looking at the next thing, which was CDs. So
to get back on that physical media thing, there is one thing. It's one thing to listen to a record like this through your phone, through some electronic means like YouTube or Spotify or something. But there is something completely different about listening to it in a physical form and a media where you can appreciate it a little more. When this record was released, it was designed for us to hear it this way. It wasn't designed for it to be streamed, So always give physical media a chance. It keeps businesses like Kenny's open for all of us to enjoy, and to get things like that. And it's not all just about streaming. Sometimes streaming's great to see if you like something, if it's going to appease your mind before you spend your hard-earned money on something. But always try to keep that physical media in mind, because
the word I think about, Josh, is experience.
Yeah.
It's a different experience when you're sitting at the computer going, okay, I like that track. But then when you sit down and listen to the whole album and you hold the album and all this, you've heard about it. It's the experience.
I mean,
it is an experience, and there's an audible difference. I mean, and it's something you've gotta, I don't know if you gotta be into it, but if you're listening to something digital, even from cassette, CD, record, there's difference in the fidelity of it.
Yep.
But with streaming, it's so hard for me because there's just so much out there, so it's hard for me to focus on.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I like this song, but then I might just skip to something, or I might just skip it right away because I'm tired of it after 20 seconds, and it's hard to keep my attention when you're listening.
When it comes to physical media, the prime example will be how many times we have picked this thing up and handed it to each other and looked at it just in the course of the 40 minutes that we've had, and referenced it without.
Rick Beato did a podcast where it was a 3-part deal. He broke it into 3 sections, and he said music is created differently, it's distributed differently, and it's consumed differently. And he said that those of us who were able to, when we were kids, scrape together a little bit of money.
Mike says this all the time.
Finally go down to the record store and pick up that cassette or that CD or that record album, that vinyl, and go home. You are invested in that because you worked your butt off to get it. You come home, you open it up, you read the liner notes, you're all over it, and you're listening through it, and you've invested something of yourself in actually getting that music, and it's a shame that streaming can't deliver that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your story, Mike. Mike, I love how Mike tells us.
It's just, there's two things to it. I kind of meant it's when you're getting into it and you don't have a lot of disposable income, and whether you're a teenager or whatever, and okay, you got $20, I'm going to buy this CD. When I was a kid and teenager, I'd spend hours down at the Budget or Music Syndicate. Like, I'd have this one in my hand, because I might not get $20 for another month, So I want to make this. I want to make sure this isn't a piece of crap I'm buying. And a lot of times it was, and it makes it really hard. It made it really hard at that time to discover new stuff, because when you don't want to take a chance, you're going to keep on. You want to buy something you're somewhat familiar with. So that's kind of where the streaming. It's easy to discover new things, but even with albums and CDs now, you can find things that are still cheaply priced and take a chance on something and not feel like you wasted your money. You could buy something for $5 and.
Well, the Midwest experience was one top 40 station, one country station, maybe if you're lucky, an album station.
We won't say what those stations were in town, but everybody knows.
I had a friend in Seattle who later went to go work for KEXP Radio. But what I did is I met him over the computer in the 80s, which is kind of a feat in the 80s. But I would send him a box of blank Denon D90s. And he would get all of this amazing vinyl 12-inch mixes and stuff. This is when industrial was coming along, New Age had passed. And he would just make me these mixtapes off of this impossible to find amazing stuff. And he'd send me these tapes, and I'd be going to Budget, and I'd be picking up a copy of Goldmine Records and flipping through the pages and see where can I import one of these from. And it was a whole experience. It wasn't just listening to the song. It's like, no, you're in 100%.
You know what I really wish is I had a window in time where I could go down to Budget and overlook and see all of you at the same store, at the same time, but not literally knowing that we were going to know each other
those
someday.
things that wonder if that ever happened over the years.
Right.
When Budget was on second,
Yeah.
then when they were on 5th,
Mhm.
then when they were over on Washington.
Yep.
I think they were over there a little bit.
Yep.
Too.
You walk into Budget because I would drive from Dickinson for my guitar lessons on Saturday, and I would get here early, and I would go into bed, and I would just go straight to the import section to go see what was there, what the new thing was that wasn't available to us.
Keith and Larry and Dennis, and Larry works at the zoo.
Yeah. But Clint brought up a good point, especially I'm not saying anything about the radio, but it was hard to find with what our radio was at the time. It was hard to find.
Well,
I've said this before. I spent summers out in Minnesota,
Q98.
and I'd go to Fargo, and like they'd have Q98, and for a kid. To go 200 miles and that Fargo would have a station like that just blew my mind, and I was just like, then I was kind of pissed, like, why can't we have that?
I still remember the jingle, always rocking with you.
Yeah. But so as far as rock at that time, it was if it was a rock song that had crossed over into the top 40, or if you had MTV and could catch something on MTV, but.
MTV was a lifeline for the Midwest kids.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We could finally see stuff and especially the concerts on Saturday night.
What was that late stuff? They would have some of the
Headbangers
Ball.
Headbangers Ball on Saturday
Yes.
and 120 minutes on Sunday. Those were our staples.
My thing was on the USA Network. They had Night Flight.
Night Flight. Yeah.
And so I could see sometimes I could see a lot of this British stuff that I liked, or there would be an accompanying video to it. It was like, oh my goodness sakes, this is something amazing. And I'd have the VCR ready to go and try to tape some of that stuff because it would be gone for 5 months again or whatever it was. But
I saw Judas Priest for the first time on Night Flight. I remember that.
They were kind of edgy. I remember one night we were in Dickinson staying at my cousin's house. I was probably it might have been in junior high, maybe. And they had an episode that was all of the, how would you say, adult versions of the videos. Like China Girl, Girls on Film with Duran Duran, a lot of those. And I was like, I don't remember this being a naked song. Off.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of edgy. And I think there's a streaming Night Flight channel now. Someone's
Really?
trying to revive it, but probably another doggone subscription.
Well, one of the goals I would also say too, and we've talked about this in a store, and we've been working on it. And Brad, I'm going to tell you something. If you guys and you girls, I always try to be gender inclusive. You come into the store on an early Saturday morning, right, or Sunday afternoon. You're going to see Brad down here, and a lot of the guys were all down here Saturdays, especially. As one time we tend to be. If you want to come in when we're all here, come in at about 11 o'clock on Saturday, and we'll all be down here. But Brad is always working on stereos, and he's getting some help from Mike or Josh or any of us who are kind of going through stuff. And my goal is to always tell the kids that we got to remember, kind of like what we're just going back to, that this is a tangible item, right? That is a sound quality. The sad thing about what we see with some of the presentation formats and how we're going to play records or CDs today has been seriously disrupted by the dollar again, and what we see putting out with products. Like, you can get these over-the-shelf products that you can go to any of the box stores, and you got little speakers like this, right? And you got plastic cartridge with cheap needles, and they work. I always try to tell the kids they work. That's the best I can say. The challenge with it, it's not how you were meant to hear that record. And so you're kind of going against, or a CD, because a lot of them have CD players too. And so you're kind of going against, right, the whole idea of the vinyl by playing one of those. And if you come in here, we can set you up, or, Brad's been bringing some of his stuff down too. I've been putting some of his stuff out down there. But if you get a nice turntable, if you get a nice receiver, right, and you can now actually hear music the way it's intended to be. And all of us, I would say by now, probably have a real type of listening system, probably, right?
Yeah, and so I'm very much into the vintage stuff, but there's also new equipment that's being made. But you do have to invest in it a little bit, and that's maybe the downside of it if you're just getting started.
But the beauty of buying a brand new turntable is listening to all your music all over again to hear how
It's brand new
different
again.
it sounds.
You'll be captivated by,
Yep.
oh my goodness, I didn't know that was there, or I've heard this for the first time. And, yeah, good times.
And then I think for me, because I'm so busy, one of the things, and I keep saying it, and now I've got the place up here that I can do it, but I would really like to just actually take at least an hour a week and kind of do what we're doing here and just sit in my chair, my rocking chair over there, and just play a record and just relax and enjoy the record. No
Anything else?
no other inputs coming in. Just sit down, even turn the phone off, right? And let's just listen to this record and
But
just
could you
experience
do
it.
that?
Could you? Yeah.
Could you, Kenny, do that? Sit still
It'd be hard.
for 45
This man
minutes?
has so many irons in the fire, so many kettles on the stove. It's just the way he is.
They base the
all right.
Energizer Bunny off of this guy right here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And with that, do we have any questions? And nothing came in?
We had a couple of comments.
Oh, okay. What were they?
Let's see here.
Only the good
Get
ones.
back to that window here. So, Eric Wingenbach is our commenter of the day. He said VH1 used to have an indie themed show.
Oh, yeah.
He said he discovered the Minneapolis band Jayhawks there. And then we were talking live concerts, live albums. Joe Cocker, Little Help from My Friends, and he says, Talking Heads Stop Making Sense. There's a decent live album.
Yeah, that is. And video as well. Because that really captured the event. It's actually on Blu-ray, too. You can find it on Blu-ray.
Oh, my goodness. This guy's...
I have David Byrne's, what was that other movie he did? Strange Stories or True Stories?
True Stories.
True Stories.
Yep, that's fun.
Yeah. One of those stories was inspired by a guy I know, and he has the writing credit for the movie, although the movie he wrote and the movie that David Byrne made they don't resemble each other in any way.
Interesting.
I listened to Thomas Dolby's Soul Inhabitant live album anytime I'm doing yard work, snowblower, lawnmower, anything.
That's your secret.
And so that's why my lawn doesn't have any discernible pattern.
Well, let me say this, too, that, it looks like we are drawing to an end here. And so I want to end with it's going to be a funny ending, with a funny commercial from the 80s. We'll see how many of you remember this. And Lance, it's going to be a little bit out of your time here.
A little bit.
But I remember growing up, and there was always a commercial, and it said, what do we remember about E.F. Hutton?
When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen.
Okay? Well, I'm going to tell you all right now. Brad here is my E.F. Hutton. And anybody here who knows, when you hear Brad speak, people, you need to listen, because this guy... He is so intelligent.
I get a lot of things wrong. By the way, that VH1, I think it was called Cutting Edge.
Yes.
I think that was the
See,
name of it.
So,
yeah.
So again, prove me right.
No. I'll tell you what, there's a lot I've learned from these guys. I broadened my horizons a little bit, and when you get into the 90s and stuff, I kind of lost track. I was raising a family, and these guys are really sharp with the metal. The new British metal and all of that stuff. I mean, I can't keep up with it all, but there's a lot of stuff up here. It's old and maybe it's fading out. But thanks, Kenny. That's very nice. But,
no, we appreciate you.
Don't have to. Yeah.
We have one more Yardbirds trivia.
Let me see that cover.
Roger the Engineer. The album. So it's got the weirdly drawn broadcast recording engineer, and he's a humpbacked. I actually knew an engineer named Roger who was from an injury when he was younger, and Roger the Engineer. It's like, who thought?
And so let me just close by saying, right, with Delaney and Bonnie and friends on tour with Eric Clapton, remember, right, with every album, there is a story to be told. So,
nice job. Wow. Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you very much.
Peace out.